Hey, what's up? Continuing with the March of Robots, it's me, Gazbot. Well, today is day two, but I'm going to take us back in time and look at day one. Day one, I did King Joe, which is a tokusatsu villain from the Ultra Hero series, Ultra 7, among others. I will show you that I actually filmed myself working on it. I did it all, well, not filmed, I screen capped, whatever you want to call it. There's a recording of it, is the point. I sped it up because I spent a long time on it, and this video is more like 15 minutes. It didn't get done in 15 minutes. And then I'll show you what I did real quick for today as well, although I did not capture that. Anyway, on to this.
Okay, so for day one, I wanted to do King Joe. And what you see here, that first little sketch was just him out of my head without looking at any reference. And then, as you can see, I compiled a ton of reference on the left. A lot of it is from action figures as opposed to the show because a lot of it was clearer. And I did a kind of static pose just to kind of get a feel for the character. Then, so basically, I did one sketch out of my head, one sketch from reference. And then I said, okay, let me try to figure out a cool pose and use the reference. But I find that a lot of times if I am looking at reference and trying to figure out how to draw a character while trying to figure out the pose I want, either it becomes way off model or more likely it becomes very stiff and it becomes just straight standing up and down or almost a copy of the pose the character is in. So that's why I did those first two warm-up sketches, well, sort of warm-up sketches, but they were part of the process. So then I didn't copy this, I didn't base this on any one image. There are a couple different versions of King Joe. I was going for the original version from the Showa era, from the original Ultra 7 series in the 60s. Although there were some inconsistencies even in my reference material, like the action figure, which had a lot more clear details from the versus the show and etc. And he's supposed to be a robot built up of three mechanical ships from space, but in real life he was played by an actor in a rubber suit, so some of the joints look like silver rubber on the in the actor, but then the toys kind of made it look more like metal because that's what it's supposed to be. So even though I was basing it on a very specific version of a very specific character, there were still a lot of creative decisions to make of what details I will, will I follow more the show or the toy or what it's supposed to be or, what it actually is. And so that inherently, even though I tried to not put my own style on it, I did. And the same thing happened when I went into color because there's some color variations depending on what images you're looking at, etc. But my main goal was to get a nice dynamic robot from a tokusatsu, which is Japanese special effects, meaning Godzilla, Ultraman, Super Sentai, which is Power Rangers, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to have one of those to kick it off because that's probably what most of the robots are going to be. Not all, but most. And I wanted to do a full body in color. Now, granted, this is not full body, and as you can see, I end up moving in and out and rearranging the arms and stuff. But I wanted to have a dynamic because he's supposed to be gigantic, so I wanted to show that he's huge. That we're looking up at this monster. And I wanted to, I put more work into this one than I will every day. Not that I won't ever put this much work in again, but this is sped up. But the total time, I think it was about 5 hours this took me, and I could have easily worked on it more. Like I had roughed in at some point, I roughed in some buildings that I didn't finish in the final stage, etc. But I needed to get it done in one day, and the same day I did this, I had to re-export and send out some files for a client. And then I've been teaching a comic book art class at my local comic store, so I had to do that. And then later I did art casters. So I had, and that's on top of all my normal, everyday life stuff. I had those things to take care of. So it was not the best day to pick to have a really intense, long March of Robots subject matter, but it was day one, and like I said, I wanted to start with a bang, so I just got a little bit less sleep, and that's fine. Hey, so what you see here is basically a really tight rough. This would be called pencils, maybe even. And I had a good angle that I liked, but then I decided I wanted to put some trees. As you can see in the one shot on the upper left of my reference, that was from an image from one of the shows. And I put in some buildings. I didn't actually necessarily copy those buildings. And I also early on decided I wanted to tilt it at an angle. Since he's a villain, I thought it might be interesting to give it sort of a Dutch angle, as they say, but not quite that much. And here, even though I'm not doing color yet, I was unhappy with that leg, obviously, so I'm adjusting it. But I wanted to have it be sort of dark so that there's like fire and explosion behind him, and he has lights in his chest. So I wanted it to be a thing where you could kind of see those lights glowing coming towards you, like it's maybe there's smoke in the air, it's nighttime, whatever. But those are decisions I made kind of early on. Now, right here, I'm going in, and this is me inking. This is all done in Photoshop, in case you weren't clear, and CS3 to be exact. And I'm inking it with a regular. Everything I use is, with the exception of some colors, are standard brushes. So most of my roughs were done with like the second brush, no pencil at all, no pen tool, all brush. And most of the light, the reddish color was done with like a 35, softer brush at 75% opacity, and then I take that whole layer and bring it down to like 50%. This is done at 100% opacity. I forget what thickness it was. It's basically like a 13 or a 19 is what I usually use, but I was working so big. This is 11 by 17 native, so that I could print it out that large if I decide to later. And that was the other thing, is I had considered maybe I'll make a print of this if it comes out well. So for that reason, I was working at higher resolution and a larger size than I normally would be for if it was just a sketch or whatever. And here you can see I was unhappy with those antenna things on his head, so I sort of redrew the roughs of them to try to get it a little closer to what I thought it should be before I went in with the inks. But what I was saying is with the inks, I don't remember the exact diameter, but I sort of start with a heavier one on the outside using the brush tool, but with the thick, not the thick, the harder brush, so that it doesn't have any blur or opacity, and it's at 100% opacity, so it does function more as a pen or a brush would, with a little bit of a deadline. I mean, obviously there's pressure sensitivity because I'm using a Cintiq, but it's not there's not as much like gray on the edges, I should say. And I got pretty far into the inks. And then eventually I'm gonna have to stop. You'll see a little break because I was invited to do Artcasters, which I was happy about, but I was worried about recording this while being in a Google Hangout that was recording the Artcasters at the same time. So I stopped. So there'll be a little bit of a gap, and that'll come up in a minute. But yeah, these chest pieces here, I was a little bit worried about getting just right. And again, this goes back to different references. Not so much the black outline, which I'm sort of struggling with here. Eventually, I get it where I like it. But there's lights in it, and there's sort of a honeycomb, like hexagon sort of pattern. And in some of them, it's all like white, and some of them, it's like a grayish black where you can see the outline. Sometimes it's just glowing yellow. Sometimes it has like multicolor. So that was another thing that I kind of left for the coloring phase. Like I sort of was going to do everything else first. And here you can see I'm coming with little details. And uh, circles are difficult. I was trying not to use ellipse tools or circle templates. There's nothing wrong with doing that. And if it was more of a straight on circle or a car or something, maybe I would go ahead and do that. But because it's a robot and it's sort of a character, I wanted it to be a little bit more.
Oh, welcome. Hi. Little pause here. The action stops. The continuity won't match up. You'll notice a big jump in how much I got done. That is because I did the Artcasters with Scott and Josh today, or yesterday, when it was on. I'll put a link below to that, and I actually worked on it on the show, so you could, if you want to watch it in real time, you can see that. But I wouldn't advise watch me work in real time, but just to see an interesting show where we talk about, among other things, the difference between working digitally and versus traditionally. But we talk about a lot of other stuff too. So you can check that out or not. And now I'm going to go back to the end of this thing. Right, marching.
So, yeah, that was the interruption I was talking about. So I was talking about the circles and how I wanted them to look a little bit more organic, which sounds weird since it's not organic. But again, this comes back to yeah, it's supposed to be metal and precision engineered from this alien race and it's a robot. But in reality, it's handmade by humans on Earth and most of it's rubber and plastic. So it's a little bit imperfect. And it's the sort of thing, too, where it's the type of robot that you want to emote, even though it's, piloted and not sentient and it shouldn't emote, you want it to. So I think having hand-drawn circles, even if they're a little imperfect, adds to that. And here you can see I'm messing around with the hexagon stuff like I was talking about. I kind of painstakingly drew out the honeycomb hexagram sort of stuff on one side, and then duplicated it on the other side. Then I duplicated white on top of black, and then I stroked it with the stroke tool, and I kept deciding how much I want to show. And then underneath I had just white, and then I put the rainbows. And as you can see, I'm just futzing with it. So I'm full into the color area now, and I'm working that. But what I want to talk about a little bit is the March of Robots in general that I'm doing. It was created by Chocolate Soup, which is also known as DaCosta. I found out about it because of David White, who runs MechaZone, and I didn't do it properly. Like 2 years ago, I attempted it, and then I had a vacation, so I failed. So my goal is to do it correctly this year, one a day. Which, and they even say you don't have to do one a day, but the way I am and the way I approach things, if I'm not going to do one a day, I don't see the point of doing it. But I want to be able to, in addition to having the challenge and the fun and getting people to follow along and look at it, I want to potentially have finished products at the end. And so I was approaching this a bit as maybe I can make a print out of it. And I'm not sure if I will or not, but all of them, I'm like, potentially this could be something. And in addition to that, I always am looking for ways to incorporate my personal work and challenges with possibly getting some money, because I make money with my art working for clients all the time. But the goal is to one day support myself with my art that is, my own personal art, even if it's stuff like this, like challenges that I'm giving myself. So I was like, well, maybe I could kind of kill two birds with one stone, because at shows I will do sketch commissions, and for a certain amount of money, I'll do what I could get done at the show fairly quickly. And I also take commissions at home where I spend a little more time on them, and they're a little bit more deluxe. And sometimes people get real specific, like this character in this outfit jumping off a roof, and the more specific and detailed the person gets, the more expensive it's going to be. So I was thinking this would be sort of a opportunity for people that are interested in that sort of thing to get a midpoint where it's definitely higher quality. I'm spending more time and using better tools than if I was just doing a convention sketch, but it still is just tell me what character, what robot you want done. There's no further instruction than that. So you're paying way less than you would for a commission, but you're potentially getting commission quality. And I have a link to my Etsy store, and I have on the video here, you can see the little information button, and that'll take you right to my Etsy store. And I made a special category just for March of Robots with ways you could buy influence, essentially. I'm a politician up for sale, folks. And it goes from $2 to $55. And just to give you an idea, what you're looking at here, this wasn't bought or voted on or anything. This is just, me choosing I wanted to do this. But this would be for you $20. Because this is digital art only, and I'm doing a robot with, it's full body. Like I said, you can't see his feet, but it's full body in color, and there's some background elements. There's the trees and the explosion and things like that. So it's not like just a standing in space kind of character sketch. And if you wanted me to do something like this for you, it would be $20. And that $20 would basically get you to pick any robot you want. Do this robot. No fuss, no muss, no discussion, no voting. That is the robot I will do for one of my days. And then for $20, I'll make sure that not only do I do that robot, but I do it to this level of detail and amount of showing of the robot. Then I will take the file, make a high-res digital copy, and email it to you so that you could print it out and make a print of it however you like. So that is one example of one tier. The highest tier would be $55, and that would get you a full body with a little bit of background, but instead of doing it digitally, I would do it traditionally. It wouldn't be color, most likely. It would be black and white ink. Possibly you'd get a little bit of gray or a little bit of color of the Copics, but usually it would just be inks, and that would include shipping too. So for $55, you could get a traditional version of something this big and detailed, this much background work mailed to your house, which is way cheaper than I would ever do it normally. On the lower end, for $6, I will just do a digital headshot and give you, the file for that, which actually day 2, I did a digital headshot, so that in a minute, you'll have an example of that. If you're not looking to spend that much money, or you're not terribly concerned about owning it or whatever, the two lowest tiers I have are $5 and $2. And for $5, my final day, day 31, is going to be voted on. So I don't get to pick. It's going to be determined completely by votes. And for $5, you get a vote. But more importantly, I'm going to, if I get $20 or more, do traditional art. And then you get a raffle ticket, basically, to own it. That's the digital headshot I was talking about, by the way. That would be $6 if you wanted to commission that. And the lowest tier is just $2, and that would get you a vote for the final day robot. And whatever robot wins, you would get a high-res file that you could print out, so that, if you just want to be able to throw a vote in and kind of help me along. So, depending on how much you have to spend or you want to contribute, any help is appreciated. And if you don't want to do it or you can't afford to do it, that's fine too. Just follow along and cheer me on, and I appreciate that. And I hope you had a good time watching this. And I hope maybe you'll do March Robots if you're not next year. And if you are doing it this year, let me know in the comments below. All right, thanks a lot, and happy marching and roboting. Good.
I'm